If you should be able to pause right there.
Alrighty.
Hit the button, boom, up there.
Y'all, there'll be breaks today, so we may not.
All right, welcome to class. I see Terrence has made it. Benjamin's here. I'm sure that we'll have the others joining in. We're man down in the classroom, but other than that, everything is as it's been all week. Keep Nathan. In fact, I'll lead our prayer, and we'll mention Nathan, who had to go to the ER last night. He was here earlier, and it's going to be all right, but he's not going to be in class today. Let's bow together as we begin. Holy Father, we're grateful for the opportunity to finish up this section of thy word, and we pray that today we'll use our time wisely, learn things that will be helpful and we can help others with. We pray for Nathan that his health will improve and that he'll be able to continue the work that he's doing for thee, give his doctors and treat those who are treating him wisdom, and may the medications work in his body for good. We also pray for those who are suffering because of the earthquake, and there's so many who are displaced and have lost family members. We ask that there might be some relief in that part of the world for them, and things might go as well as they can now. And Father, we pray for all those who will be traveling this weekend, getting back home, that we'll all be safe and will be faithful in our congregations, and that the church will grow where we are, and that we will grow and our families will prosper spiritually. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, we are in Judges 11. We've gotten down to verse 27 yesterday, and we're continuing this series of lessons that you may remember from verse 2, lessons from a harlot's son, and they're coated blue all the way through this chapter. So I want to just at least give you the rest of these. There are 5 more that we lessons to the chapter. We're in Judges 11, 27. Those in the wrong often accuse those in the right of wrong, so do not hesitate to correct the argument. That's sort of long, but what's happening here is Jephthah's dealing with an unreasonable person. He's trying to promote a revision of history that's not true, and that's not uncommon at all. So you have to be willing to speak up and say, no, that's not correct. This is what's correct. And you can't let that narrative continue that's a lie or that is inaccurate. The one under that, when in conflict, appeal to the Lord to do his will. I have been to that point, and you may probably have before as well, where you're at loggerheads. Do you know that phrase? When you're at loggerheads with somebody and you just can't work out a solution. It's like an impasse. They are hard set on their view, and you're hard set that that's wrong. Well, that's the situation. How do you go forward? Well, at that point, you just have to turn it over to the Lord. Say, Lord, thy will be done. Whatever it is. If I'm wrong, I don't want my side to win or my view to take hold, but you're convinced that your side's right, So, Lord, may your will be done. And it depending on the situation, if it's congregational, you may have to appeal to the elders to mediate or decide between the two sides. But a lot of times, Paul and Barnabas sort of went their own way. Paul and Barnabas decided to go their own way when they couldn't work out, where John Mark had left, and Paul was like, I can't take him on this next trip. Barnabas was like, we got to give him another chance. They couldn't agree on that, so they went their separate ways. And they both did mission work in different areas. So it tended to be good for the kingdom, but they couldn't work together at that point. All right, the next one, selfish people will not listen to reason. We saw that earlier. It continues through verse 28. Then if you're marking the key idea in every chapter, I have a blue circle there. So the key idea in Judges 11 is Jephthah vowed a vow. Jephthah's vow. This is a controversial passage, or maybe not controversial, but there are two views of it. And I'll tell you my view. You can consider, study, think about, and decide what you think this is saying. But verse 31, Jephthah vowed during the battle, before the battle, if I'm successful, I will offer whatever comes out of the door of my house as a burnt sacrifice. Now, notice he says whatsoever in verse 31, not whosoever. He didn't intend for this to work out the way it did, but I put myself in that place and I think, what did he expect to come out of the door of his house? Or who, right? I mean, did he expect an animal to come out of the door of his house? I know that they had different traditions and practices that we do, but it still seems a little strange. And then either way, it was foolish. You know, don't put yourself on the hook for something that you have no control over. As here, notice he also says, we'll offer it up for a burnt offering. So it's obvious that he intended for it to be an animal, but that's not how it works out. 32, he was successful in fighting the Ammonites. 33, and then when he gets home, his daughter came out, his only daughter, only child of the house. And it came to pass, verse 35 just makes my blood boil and makes me cry at the same time. I mean, he said when he saw her, now she didn't make the vow. She's just glad to see her dad. She's out, he lived, he survived the battle, he won the victory. She's coming out celebrating, the timbrels and dances, verse 34. And he rent his clothes and said, alas, I've circled all the personal pronouns in verse 35. You see, this is all about Jephthah. My, me, I, my, I, in one sentence. But he says, alas, my daughter, thou hast brought me very low. He's blaming her for his stupidity. He's transferring guilt to the innocent and to the victim here. And thou art one of them that trouble me. Well, that's a terrible father that would blame his daughter for his mistake. For I have opened my mouth unto the Lord, and I cannot go back. So the lesson in verse 35, do not guilt your children for your own mistakes. Don't blame them. Own your mistakes. Try to fix them if you can. We all make mistakes. Let's try to limit them, especially when it involves our children. But don't transfer guilt to them. And a lot of times children feel guilt when they shouldn't feel guilt anyway. Their view is limited. Like one thing, whenever there's a divorce in a family, and you'll have this in your congregation, even if you don't have to deal with it personally. Who do the children think messed up the marriage when mom and dad divorced? They think they did it. What I do wrong? Because their view is self-centered at that immature age. So you got to really coach them on that. It's not you. This is adults dealing with this, and they may even need counseling to help see that they're not on the hook for it. So, verse 36: sacrificial faith can be found in the young and the mistreated, because she handles this so much better than Jephthah does. She said unto him, my father, if thou hast opened thy mouth unto the Lord, do to me according to that which proceeded out of thy mouth. For as much as the Lord hath taken vengeance for thee of thine enemies, even the children of Ammon. So she says, well, it is what it is. I accept it.
She's an awesome daughter.
She really is. Incredible. Celebrating dad's victory and then willing to deal with his promise, his foolish vow. So sacrificial faith can be found in the young and also the mistreated. She illustrates both of those. Now that gets us to the middle part of verse 36. according to that which hath proceeded out of thy mouth. So what proceeded out of his mouth? That's verse 31. Whatsoever cometh forth of the doors of my house to meet me shall surely be the Lord's, and I will offer it up for a burnt offering. That's what came out of his mouth, a burnt offering. So what did he do to her? Well, the two views are, one is that he didn't kill her, that it was she was a perpetual virgin. In other words, she never could get married and have kids like she would have wanted. But I don't read it that way. I mean, that's accommodating what you actually read here to make it sanitized. Because what you read here is that he did what he said he would do, and that's what he said he would offer a burnt offering. Now, we haven't gotten to the appendix yet, but in chapter 17 through 21, we find that there's some pretty rough stuff that goes on during this period of history. This would not be out of order or out of like cutting up a woman in 12 pieces and mailing her. And some of the things they did, they killed a whole tribe of people and took the virgin girls from the tribe and gave them to Benjamin. They captured 200 more girls that were at the dances in the meadow and gave them to the other 200 that didn't have a husband. There's some pretty rough stuff that goes on here. So to me, I think that he did what he said he was going to do. That's my view. But you could take a different view if you think that this warrants that. All right, we did notice that she knew the specifics of the vow. Vengeance on the enemies. That's what he predicated the vow on. Give me success and I will offer it. So she knew about it. And she said unto her father, let this be done. She does have one request. She says, let me have 2 months that I can go with my friends and celebrate and mourn my virginity, meaning that I didn't get married and have kids, have a normal life. I'm just going to go. And, I guess if she had somebody to marry, she could have got married there, but she couldn't have kids in 2 months, So she decided that she would, and that was, of course, the right decision in that situation. So she does, and he gives her that time. She comes back, verse 39, who did with her according to his vow, which he had vowed. And she knew no man. And it was a custom in Israel that they would celebrate her every year for 4 days. There's those who take the other view focus on that phrase right there. She knew no man, that it was a perpetual virginity. But it doesn't make sense to me because number one, it plainly says that he did what he said he would do. And number two, why would they mourn her for 4 days in a year if she were still living? They could go visit her for 4 days in a year. I guess they could mourn that she was perpetually single, but it makes more sense to me, at least, that he did what he said he would do. Now we're in chapter 12. All right, let's see. Terrence, you'll be our first reader today. So read for us verse 1, and then we will do the keys to the chapter. But go ahead and dive in there if you're where you can and you have your speaker. Patrick, welcome. Terrence, read Judges 12:1, please, sir.
Okay. Can you hear me? Is it clear?
Yes. Yes, we can hear you. Thank you. Ooh, there you go.
Okay, Judges 12:1. And the men of Ephraim gathered themselves together and went northward and said unto Jephthah, wherefore passed thou over the fight against the children of Ammon, and didst not call us to go with thee? We will burn thine house upon thee with fire.
It's pretty drastic, isn't it? We're going to put you in your house and burn it down on top of you. Whew. Have we met these men of Ephraim before? Remember, we did, and I said, remember these babies, right? Remember these immature people. They're going to cause problems again later. But here we are. They're a bunch of troublemakers. They're thin-skinned. They are selfish. So the men of Ephraim gathered, why didn't you call us? That's the same thing they said last time with Gideon or Zerubbabel, right? Why didn't you let us fight? We want the glory too. And Zerubbabel handled it differently than Jephthah does. Zerubbabel, Gideon was able to calm them down by saying, look, you got the princes, you did the best part, and I just did the regular people, So he was able to, appease their pride. But it's not going to work out that way here. Now, I'm not going to be able to do sermons today, at least not all the sermons, because we got a lot to cover. So, what's on the screen right now, the danger of misplaced anger, is a lesson that a lot of churches need. But I'm not going to go through it with you, but you can take a snapshot of it. And if you could read my handwriting, then you could develop it for yourself if you wanted to use it for yourself or for your family or for in a class or a sermon. Now, while you're doing that, and I'll have all this on the screen together, you notice that we're calling chapter 12 the day jealousy killed 42,000 people. The day jealousy killed 42,000 people. Well, when you hear that, you immediately want to know that story, right? What in the world? But that's exactly what happens here. Now, your keys to the chapter, you notice the key verse is 12:6. The key thought, our speech can betray us. Our speech can betray us. If, as a child of God, I'm using the words of the devil, that betrays me, betrays my Lord. So I have to be careful. And a lot of times people who come to Christ out of the world, they're used to speaking, potty mouth, using language illicitly, way that they shouldn't do it. So they have to work on that. That's not easy to overcome. It's a bad habit. But we have to keep working at it. And it's overcomable, but sometimes it takes a while. The outline of these 15 verses, 1-4, misplaced anger. 5-7, mispronounced word. It's a curious story. You don't read about the like of it in the Bible. It's interesting. And then 8-15, miscellaneous judges. We're going to knock out the judges 10, 11, 12 pretty quick, right? I think it's 10, 11, 12 in just a few verses. And then we'll get to number 13 in the next chapter, who is Samson. All right, that's all I'll say about verse 1. I'll give you just another second if you want to take that picture, or if you're writing, trying to get the notes down. And here's how Jephthah handles the children of Ephraim who are being so bratty. Jephthah said to them, I and my people were at great strife with the children of Ammon, and I called you, and you wouldn't come. He said, no, that's what you're saying is, and I've run into this, and people who want to cause trouble in churches, they will totally reinvent the wheel. They'll just say that they will make up a whole new narrative that's not at all what happened. Blame the other person. Well, that's ungodly, it's dishonest. And I hope they repent, because you don't cause disturbance among God's people and God not know that, not notice that, not punish for that. So repent. You better repent. It's better never to do it. Don't do it. If you're emotional, you're angry, walk away. Pray about it. Deal with it. Take your personal desires out of it and put the church first. All right, so he said, I called you, delivered me not out of their hands. I needed you, and you didn't show up. That's what really happened. Now you continue as we go down this chapter. I had to put my life in my hands and go fight undermanned, and yet God gave me the victory anyway. Now, you Gileadites are fugitives of Ephraim from among the Ephraimites and the Manassites. That's what they're saying. They're saying, even though you're from the same area as we are, you're fugitives. You don't belong to us. You're second-class citizens. Now verse 5, the Gileadites took the passages of Jordan. What that means is that there are only certain places you could cross the Jordan because of either the topography is too steep or congested, or the water's too deep. And so there are certain places that are fords that people use to cross the river. There's no bridges, but they would wade through the water. So the Gileadites, they captured the fords, the passages. And whenever somebody tried to cross the river, they'd stop them, a checkpoint. And they would say, now this is the interesting part. Before I leave verse 5, there's that lesson right there. Senseless opposition brings ruin to the opposer. So they're going to get their comeuppance here. Like these bratty Ephraimites, now the table's going to turn. And those are the 42,000 that die. All right. So they asked each person that comes to the river, "Are you an Ephraimite?" Nay. Well, that's a lie. Sometimes it was a lie because they're trying to get back home. And they say, "Okay, we'll say Shibboleth." Pronounce that word. Notice I've underlined the H. And they said Sibboleth. They could not frame the H. Can you tell somebody from Boston if you're talking to them, they got a certain accent, Alabama, same thing, are you from Alabama? It's interesting that I was, especially when I was younger, I would go preach somewhere and then say, "You know how much of an accent to be from Alabama?" And I go other places, like I went to Alaska to preach, and they said, "We can't understand your accent." I don't have an accent. Yeah, you do. So we deal with that with each other, somewhat. And certainly as we travel, we find that. So the same thing here. There's certain sounds that are hard to form if you're from a certain area, because that's not the way you say it. There's some words that I have trouble not stretching out the N sound, anyway, you may be that way. All right, so our speech can betray us. That's a lesson here. So what happened is they could not frame to pronounce it right. Then they took him and slew him. So everything was writing on whether you could say that word or not. If you could not say Shibboleth, take him over there and kill him. He's an Ephraimite. He's lying about where he's from. And so 42,000 Ephraimites died. So you look back at the big picture. Why is this even happening? Because the men of Ephraim are babies, because they wanted the glory. They didn't have to have this. Their jealousy caused 42,000 people to die. There was no sense in it. So what about us? Are we sometimes our own worst enemies? We get ourselves in a bad place just because of our pride, and then our stubbornness keeps us there. Well, we should learn from this not to be that way. And then I also made the note, jealousy and pride are deadly, aren't they? They're not innocent emotions. Jealousy and pride can be deadly. Now, I want to back up one screen and show you just real quickly. Here is each judge's homeland. So where everybody was from. So here we are with Jephthah over here among the Ammonites here. And here's the Jordan where they're crossing over. But then all the others, Shamgar, Elon, Tola, Samson, Othniel, everybody's on that map. So you see the judges are pretty scattered throughout the land. And of course, this is over a 350-year period. So they didn't all live, at the same time. They would pop up and, do their thing, and then they would fade. Another would pop up 40 years later, do his thing like that. All right. now we go back. Let's finish this chapter. If you're marking the judges, you've got three more here. Verse 8, Ibzan is the 10th judge. Verse 11, Elon is the 11th judge. That's not Elon Musk, is maybe where he got his name, but that's an Old Testament character. Then Abdon, verse 13, is the 12th judge. 12 out of 13. So you've got boom, 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 three judges, up, down, up, down, up, down. They're minor judges. So copy the list from the introduction and put it here and highlighted the ones that we're talking about. So we've already covered all the way down to there. And now at the end of this chapter, we've covered down to there. And we're at Samson. And then the other judges are in the book of 1 Samuel. All right. Up in verse 7, Terrence, read for us verse 7, please, sir.
Yes, and what is it? Okay. And Jephthah judged Israel 6 years. Then died Jephthah the Gileadite and was buried in one of the cities of Gilead.
All right, so that is the end of one judge, and then you got another judge, another judge, another judge. So this whole section teaches us this lesson. God is eternal, but his workers are not. So God continues and he replaces his workers with new workers. So we are just a part of a grand plan that's been going on for thousands of years, and we take our role in it for a little while, and then we go back off the stage, and then somebody else until Jesus comes, and then the grand scheme or grand plan will come to an end. Now, another note is down in verse 14. Abdon, we don't know much about him, but we do know he had 40 sons and 30 nephews. So they had really big families back then, didn't they? And of course, many of them had many wives, so that's why they were able to have such large families. I'll put this note with verse 14. Some of God's noblest servants came from among the poor, obscure, and unknown. If you ask this next Sunday in your congregation, tell me about Abdon. Would anybody in your congregation be able to even know he was one of the judges? Most people wouldn't, right? And they wouldn't know any of the few details that we have. He judged 8 years and so forth. So unknown servants played an important role in God's great story. And the same thing's happening today. Some great things are done by people whose names you don't know and you'll never know. But it's not really about that, is it? It's really about God's glory, not ours. All right, that gets us to chapter 13. We're going to call this chapter A Star is Born, because this is the chapter that records the birth of Samson, an enigma among the characters of the Bible. He is just different. Your key verse is 13:8. Your key thought: teach us what we should do unto the child. And that's Samson's father is a little overwhelmed to think he's going to have a son. So tell me what I'm supposed to do with this boy. Teach me what to do. And every parent should feel that way, and they should ask that question, because we will have a great deal to do with whether our children make it to heaven or not. So teach us what we should do unto the child. Now you have 25 verses, 3 sections, 1 through 7, birth announcement to the mother. So an angel comes down and tells Samson's mother that she's going to give birth to a special son. Then 8 through 23, birth announcement to the father. He wasn't there. He seems like a little bit of a meathead to me. Do you know that term? We'll go through, maybe I'm reading between the lines, but I see a little bit of where Samson may have gotten some of his personality from his dad. He seems a little bit, maybe not the sharpest knife in the drawer. So then 24, 25, birth announcement to the world. So this chapter is about the birth. So Samson, a star is born. Now remember, we've been counting all these cycles in the book of the sin cycle. This is number 8 of 8. So this is the last one. It goes on for more than one chapter though. But you can mark in verse 1, the first 2, they did evil in the sight of the Lord delivered them in the hands of the Philistines 40 years. So there's your sin and your suffering of the cycle. And then we're going to see the supplication and the Savior, Samson. At least we'll see the Savior. We can see if we can identify their prayers. Now, we're not going to spend a lot of time in this chapter, but there's a lot here. I really would like to. But let me give you the Nazarite vow from verse 4. Let's see, we're at a new chapter. So, Benjamin, would you read for us chapter 13, verse 4? This is the angel telling Samson's mother the special qualifications or requirements of having this particular baby. Verse 4.
Okay. Now therefore beware, I pray thee, and drink not wine nor strong drink, and eat not any unclean thing.
All right. So the background of that is Numbers 6, 1 through 12, where there are the requirements for a Nazarite vow. This is not a person from Nazareth. Jesus was from Nazareth, but this is not related to that. But the artists thought that they belonged together. That's why Jesus is always pictured with long hair, because that was a part of the Nazarite vow, not people who come from Nazareth. So he likely did not have, Jews did not have long hair in the first century unless they were under a Nazarite vow. Now, typically a Nazarite vow was not lifetime. It was individual, and you made the decision to do it, not your parents for you. So you might do it for a month or a year or something, but you didn't do it forever. Now, here are the 3 requirements of a Nazarite vow. Number 1 is abstinence from strong drink. Actually, any grapes, not necessarily fermented, as you notice here. The second one is hair left uncut during the time of the vow. And so the vow of Samson was lifelong. So he never cut his hair. It was cut for him, but he didn't cut it. And then number 3, no contact with the dead body. No contact with a dead body.
I'm sorry to knock you off here. So we have the 8th oppression cycle here in 13. Where was the 7th?
7. Let's go back.
I'm sorry.
I probably skipped it because I was going to do that. So see if I can find it. Oh, I know how the quickest way to find it will be, but go back to the introduction because we listed them all there. All right, so your 8 cycles. Let's see, number 8 is 13 to 16. That's where we are. So number 7 is 10 through 12. And up here, 10:6 is your apostasy. So go back to 10:6, and that should have did evil or the equivalent of it. 10:6, so mark it there. Well, actually, I can do that. So let's just see.
I've got 6 for that one.
Uh-oh. Yeah, I misnumbered because that's what I got. So let's go back and see which one we missed. You know what I tell people? The only people that don't make mistakes are not people, right? All right, so let's go back. So you help me out and find these verses in your notes, and let's see where we misnumbered them. So 211 is number one. Did we get that one right? 37 is number two. I'm pretty sure we got those first two right.
Mhm.
So your third one is 312. You got that one marked?
Yep.
How about 41?
Yep.
61.
Yep.
957. Probably.
That's the one.
That's the one we skipped right there. So go to 957 and put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then renumber 10-6. So 957, I need to go add that in my notes. 957. Yeah, there it is. So you didn't go to 10-6 and then mark 7. You know how many times I've taught judges and nobody ever caught that before? It's because I go so fast, they're totally lost by this point. But now we fixed it. So next time, I don't know, I've probably taught judges now 5 times, I guess. I teach it in both schools. So this, I think, is the second time here. I teach it every year. All right. So what I tell you before, don't quote me from my notes, right? Do your own study. Make sure it's right. All right, back to chapter, we're in chapter 13. And we just mark the 8 cycle, 8 of 8. And that one is correct. We just skipped one. All right, now we mark that. Now, I said I was going to go fast. I gave you the Nazarite vow. And so a couple of verses in the New Testament to tie that into our commitment to God and the all-in commitment that we are to have. You might make a note of verse 5 that a baby in the womb has a separate identity from the mother. It's not a blob of protoplasm, not cells, it's not a growth, it's a baby. So abortion kills a human, not just extracts cells. You can also put notice how accurate the Bible is. It says that Samson would begin to deliver Israel from the Philistines. He does that, but he doesn't deliver them from the Philistines. He only begins to do it. And Samuel actually does it, but it doesn't stay done. They keep popping up. But 1 Samuel 1:11 is where you finally find that they're defeated. But then later, David's fighting who? The Philistines. So they're a nemesis throughout Israel's history. All right, speeding up. Here we go. I'm not going to be able to give you all this. I put a good bit of material here about parenting. Good advice at the conception of a child. Whenever the pregnancy test comes back positive, this is a good place to go to study in Next Gen Bible, or just in your Bible, but these notes. So these 3 points: take a lifelong perspective, begin your education prior to the birth, and recognize the power of parents' prayers. Those are 3 important points. We won't discuss them, but here is the answer to how to rear your child for God. That's what Manoah wanted to know. That's the father. And the blue, as you go through this chapter, I really like this study. There's preparation. You can already begin preparing to be a parent even before you're expecting a child. You should be doing that all along. Then the teaching involved, the direction, and the experiences. There's one more, demonstration. Those are all important. Teaching directing, giving experiences to the child. We took our children to things that I had no interest in, like symphony. I don't know anything about, instrumental music or any of that stuff. I remember going and sitting in a symphony performance in the Birmingham Jefferson Civic Center and being lost as a chicken in a hailstorm. But the kids were there, so you never know what talents or interests they may have. So you give them different experiences and then you watch and you see if an interest develops. All right, that's all I said about that. So here's another one called when you're expecting, or so you're expecting, ... Stay away from the booze. Isn't that interesting? The Bible says that. Neither let her drink wine or strong drink. I mean, I know it's about the Nazirite vow, but doesn't it fit very well with what we know about the dangers of alcohol to a developing fetus in the womb? Number 2, choose nutritious diet. Don't eat any unclean thing. Isn't that important? Now you're eating for 2, right? And number 3, get right and stay right with God. Get on praying terms with God. Isn't that important? You're going to go into the valley of the shadow of death and bring this child into the world. You need to be able to pray. You need to be right with God. So isn't that so practical to take that text and show how it applies in every generation, every childbirth? Now I'm going to shift over to the side and give you some other studies. You'll need to take a picture of these because there's a lot, and I'm not going to be able to give you time to copy it. But the first one is a contrast or discussion of genetics, environment, and experiences. All 3 of those have a part to play in how the child turns out. There's some things that come pre-programmed in the child. Those are genetics. You got 2 kids, 3 kids, 4 kids, whatever you got. They come out of the same gene pool, same dad, same mom. Are they the same? How many of you have brothers and sisters? All right. Are you more alike or more different than your siblings? Everybody says that. I ask that question all over the country. And I don't do this lesson, but it's another lesson that I don't remember what it is. And I've never had anybody say we're more alike. Everybody always says we're different. Isn't that interesting? They grew up in the same home, eating the same meals, going to the same church services, watching the same entertainment, and they're all different. Well, that has to mean that we are pre-programmed in some ways before we get here, because everything else is the same. All right, I can't discuss that like I want to, but here's an easy child, difficult child, the different kinds of children. That is really interesting. Did you have easy children or hard children? If you had children, if you have more than one, you may have had an easy child. Slip on eye, never gave us some stage of trouble. And then did you have a difficult child? Everything was fighting. Everything was tooth and toenail to get that kid to do anything. I think I was sort of like that. My mom still tells me stories about one showdown that my dad and I had when I was 3. And it took a half a day, but he finally won. And she said, I'm so glad he won. I wouldn't put my toys up. And he stayed with it until I put my toys up. That's a good thing, because what would that have taught me if I won?
Didn't have to do what he told you to do.
Nothing good. It wouldn't have taught me anything good. You got to stay with it. I'm glad my dad was stubborn. No, he'd stick with it. All right, the next one is siblings are different. And what I just said, there's your Bible examples of that. And then the next one is the 9 temperament variables. That is quite interesting. And you can apply it to your own children, grandchildren, whatever. These are the things that are different between siblings. And you can look like for instance, just take adaptability right there in the middle. Some kids, they roll the punches. Whatever, doesn't matter. Other kids, man, you change anything and they're like, they can't take it, Adaptability is one of the variables. All right, that's all I said about that. That's all that page down to 4 characteristics of a good father. Manoah might not have been the sharpest knife in the drawer, but he did make a good father because he had these 4 traits. Curiosity. faith, forethought, respect. Those are, every father needs that.
This whole story reminds me of Zechariah.
Yeah, there's some parallels with that.
This kind of feel to it.
All right, that's all on that page. We go to last part. This is where I wrote does not seem to be the sharpest knife in the drawer. So he wasn't there when the angel appeared to the mother. I don't know why the angel appeared to just the mother, but I sort of think I might because of how Manoah reacted. He said, "What? I didn't get to be there. I need to know this." You know, and then in verse 21, the angel of the Lord did no more appear to Manoah and to his wife. This is after the second appearance. Then Manoah knew that he was an angel of the Lord. He finally figured it out. 2 appearances later, he knew it was an angel of the Lord. Now, verse 22. Manoah said unto his wife, "We shall surely die because we have seen God." Sometimes the wife is way more reasonable than the husband. Sometimes the other way around. Men have the reputation for being more logical and women more intuitive. And that's generally true. But sometimes it can reverse. In this case, she said back to him when he said, "We're going to die. We saw God." She's got her feet on the ground. She says, I'm just going to summarize it. She said, "Does it make sense that he came down here to talk to us and he's just going to kill us?" It's like, he just told me I'm going to have a baby. Does that mean he's going to kill me? She's very reasonable, logical about it. And he's like, "We're going to die." Well, that's interesting. Now, you can mark Samson as your 13th judge in verse 24. Now, verse 25 is going to be repeated as you go through the story of Samson. The Spirit of the Lord began to move him at times in the camp of Dan between Zorah and Eshtaol. We're going to see that that's where Samson eventually is going to be buried. It's going to come full circle. And he lived quite an eventful life between this chapter and chapter 16. So you can mark this, what the Spirit began to move him. Who, Samson, when at times, not all the time, that prompts certain times, intermittent. Then where in the camp of Dan. That gets us to chapter 14. Chapter 14, we are giving the title Samson's First Failed Marriage. Samson's first failed marriage. Key verse is 14:18. The key thought, retaliation escalates. Oh, yeah? Well, we'll see about that. We're going to see that play out in this chapter between the two parties as it just keeps getting worse as they try to get even with each other. Now, there are 20 verses in chapter 14. There are 4 sections, 1 to 4, an unequal yoke. That's a New Testament phrase that we mentioned in one of the classes earlier. It's not specifically talking about marriage, but it does apply to being unequally yoked to a spouse in marriage, like with different religions. And that's what you have here. A believer in God marries an unbeliever, a pagan. Then number 2, 5 to 9, a dead lion. Samson's incredible strength is going to rip a lion apart with his bare hands. And then 10 to 18, a plowed with heifer. We'll see what that means when we get there. And then 19 and 20, a dead man's clothes. They make a bet, and Samson loses the bet. And the bet involved a change of clothes for everybody. So we'll see what happened there. Now, you might also notice, I mentioned this already, that cycle 8 continues in this chapter. And now you have the lust of the eyes in verse 1. Let's see. Emmanuel, your turn, if you will. Read for us verses 1 and 2. Judges 14, 1 and 2, please, sir.
And Samson went down to Tenath and saw a woman in Tenath of the daughters of Philistines. And he came up and told his father and his mother and said, I have seen a woman in Timnath of the daughters of Philistines. Now therefore get her for me to wife.
Do verse 3 also, please.
And his father and his mother said unto him, Is there never a woman among the daughters of my brethren, or among all my people, that thou goest to take a wife of uncircumcised Philistines? And Samson said unto his father, Get her for me, for the pleaseth me well.
All right. There are several things here I'll point out, but first, let's point out the personal pronouns. See how selfish Samson is? You see, I, me. Samson's a selfish guy. Now, the other thing that we see while we're on this one screen is that Samson told his father. What's wrong with that? He didn't ask. It's not proper respect for a father, is it? Should have asked. You don't. The parent commands the child doesn't command the parent. It shows a lack of respect. Also, I made a note in verse 3. All parents should teach their children what Manoah tries to teach Samson. Now, it's too late often if you wait till you get as old as Samson before you try to teach it. Start young. What is he trying to teach him? Marry a Christian. We would say today, marry a Christian. Is there not a girl among all the Jews, the Israelites, that you find tickles your fancy, that you're attracted to, that you think will be a wife? You've got to go outside and get a Philistine. So be sure you teach your children. I know, does any of your congregations do the kids sing program? A lot of churches do. What it is just learning Bible facts and songs and stuff. Usually at the beginning of the evening service is when churches do it. But anyway, they have certain questions they repeat over and over. And one of them is, when I grow up, I'm going to marry a, and all little children, Christian. You're teaching them from a very young age, planting that seed. Now, when they get older as a parent or as a Bible teacher, and they're teenagers, especially young teenagers, or used to be the boys thought the girls had cooties. They didn't want anything to do with any girl for a long time. And then all of a sudden the light switch, and they start sitting with the girls during church now, and they are noticing the girls. So along about that time, you need to start talking about why you marry a Christian. Because they didn't understand, they couldn't understand that before they had any attraction, before they passed through puberty, and now the whole world's changed on them. So teach them the why, not just the what. All right, let's go back to verse 1. I got a couple of things here. Men are visually stimulated, which can lead to foolish decisions. True or false? Yep, that's very true. Men are visually stimulated. Women are too, but the volume is way lower. Like you got a volume 0 to 10 on visual stimulation, seeing the opposite sex, attraction based on physical. A man's is turned up like a 9 or a 10. That's a beautiful woman, or that's a half naked beautiful woman. That's going to get the attention of the male. Christians have to control that, the second part of it especially, and a man, all of it. But a woman is more like a 2. That's a cute guy, but it's not as strong. visual stimulation. Now, women are stronger on humor and relationships. It's like, how does it make me feel? Does he make me laugh? Does he make me feel protected? Can he provide for me? It's more relational. And men and women need to understand each other and just the way we're made so that we can deal with each other intelligently without just being, ridiculous about, I can't understand why you do that, why you like that. Well, don't expect a man not to be a man, but a man he's in control of his faculties. Don't expect a woman not to be a woman, but she has to control her desires. If she's married, he's married, they got one person that they're to be attracted to. All right, the other note is not really a note, but just all these verses about the lust of the eyes. The Bible talks a lot about that, and you've got about 6 verses there that demonstrate different examples and principles that relate to eyes. Now, that's all we're going to say about the first 3 verses. So if you've got the notes made there, we will move on and talk about a dead lion next, the dead lion. So Samson is walking back and forth. And in verse 5, a young lion attacks him. That young lion was not very smart. He picked the wrong guy to jump. Because verse number 6, the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon Samson, and he rent him. What does it mean he rent him?
Tore him apart.
Tore him apart. Can you imagine being strong enough to take a living mammal, a lion, in his prime, a young lion, and just tear him apart like you might rip a piece of paper? That was an incredibly strong man. And had nothing in his hand, no weapon, but he didn't tell his parents about it. I think if I killed a lion, I'd be bragging to everybody, that I met. Go back there and see the lion I just killed. And he didn't even tell his parents about it. All right, he went down, talked to the woman. She pleased Samson well. I wrote above verse 7, the last part. He had a crush on her. That's the way we would say it today. He has a crush on this woman of this Philistine girl. Now, here are a couple of sermons or studies about Samson. As strong as Samson was, strong enough to rip a lion apart with his bare hands, as strong as Samson was, he could not overcome evil companions. 1 Corinthians 15:33. As strong as Samson was, he could not control his own emotions. Proverbs 16:25 fits there. A man that ruleth his spirit is better than a man that taketh the city. You can double check me on that, but I think that's Proverbs 16:25. Then number 3, as strong as Samson was. Do you hear me repeating that title every time? That's a lead statement. You need a lead statement when you preach. Sometimes it is the title, sometimes it isn't. But it's a phrase that you begin every point with. Because then the audience can pick up on that. And you really want them to know when you change gears. Change point 1 to point 2. Very important. Otherwise, they're just like, a sea of words just washed over them, and they weren't really able to decipher it. So use a lead statement. As strong as Samson was, number 3, he could not overcome Satan's temptations. And then number 4, as strong as Samson was, he could not overcome a woman's nagging. She's got to nag. Delilah's going to nag the truth right out of him. And that's going to get his eyes put out and eventually him dead. He was strong, but he wasn't strong in other ways. Physically strong, but spiritually weak. Then here is another sermon called 4 Reasons to Watch Your Associates. Tell me if your parents ever gave you that little speech. Watch out who your friends are, huh? And if you have kids, have you made that little speech to your kids?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, here are 4 Bible reasons for that. We will be judged by those with whom we associate. If you're hanging out with a bad crowd and people see you hanging out with that bad crowd, what are they going to think about you? they're going to be judged by that. All right, then number 2, we will choose a companion from among those we associate with. Do people marry somebody they never met? Not today, you know. Back then, maybe because the parents arranged it. But you're gonna pick somebody out of your friend set to marry one of these days.
Alan,
So, got bad friends, then you're not going to have a good companion. Yes, Ernest.
that depends on the culture, brother. Because just because that's the way it is for us in the United States does not mean that's the way it is for everybody everywhere.
That's a good point. So if you're preaching this in a culture that doesn't do that, I would just have 3 points instead of 4. You can leave that one out. It's still a valid point. But you could make the point that you need to choose a good companion. I think that's whoever's doing the choosing needs to choose wisely because marriage is an important step. Number 3, we become like those with whom we associate. Number 4, bad associations lead to destruction. And you can find plenty of examples for those 4. Now let's go into, if you're marking the key ideas in the chapters, so far we have just one, but we're adding 2 more to it. So I've highlighted a woman of Timnath in verse 1 because that's what the first section is about. And then honey and a carcass in verse 8, and then put forth the riddle in verse 12. So what happens is he ripped the lion apart, threw him on the side, and then the bees came and made a hive inside the carcass of the lion. And when he walks back by, he must have thrown it out in the woods a little bit, off the path a little bit. And so he stops when he gets to the place and he walks over there to see what he did, to relive it. And when he sees it, it's like, oh, wow, look, there are bees in there. They made honey. There's honey in there. And old Samson likes honey. So he's a pretty tough rascal. You ever robbed a beehive? You get stung when you rob a beehive. But he's in there and got the honey, and he's walking down the road eating the honey. Maybe he's brushing the bees off. I don't know. He's a tough guy. So there's honey, but he doesn't tell his father and mother about the honey either. It's all in his head, but he hasn't shared any of this. So he gets down. They've arranged for the wedding, and he's down at her city, Philistine city, and her wedding party has a bunch of guys. 30 companions. Let's see, came to pass when they saw him, they brought 30 companions to be with him. So they supplied the wedding party because it's not his town, right? So there's 30 of these guys, and they want to gamble. They want to bet. They said, Samson, I should say. Samson said to them, I want to put forth a riddle unto you. See, do you want to make a bet? And do you know the Samson personality type? Have you ever met this guy? Yeah, this is a definite personality type, right? Adrenaline junkie kind of guy he's macho. He sleeps around a lot. He's gambling. He's just living life on the edge. That's Samson. There's a lot of Samsons around today. Anyway, he says, and if you certainly will declare within 7 days, I will give you 30 sheets, King James says. I wrote above that shirts or robes and 30 change of garments. And if you can't declare it, then you got to give me 30 sheets and garments. So it's a bet. And they said, okay, we take you up on that. Put forth the riddle, we may hear it. So he says, out of the ear came forth meat, out of the strong came forth sweetness. What's he talking about?
Lion.
The lion with the honey in it. But who in the world would ever be able to figure that out? Right? He thinks he's got them for sure. So it begins to play out. There's some notes there I'm not going to read to you, but a textual note. If you want to take that picture, you can. I just will give you, gambling often leads to threats of physical violence. That's still true today, isn't it? Anybody ever get threat of a broken leg or going to attack your family. Yeah, there's a lot of things happen. When you start gambling, you get in the wrong crowd. All right, so Samson's new wife, or about to be wife, she is manipulating him because they come to her and they say, you better find out what the ransom really is, or we're going to burn your father's house down. They play for keeps. These guys are serious. We're going to burn thee and thy father's house with fire. We're going to set you on fire. That's a physical violence, a death threat. So guess what she does? She takes it serious because later, they're going to actually do this. They're going to burn down the house and kill her father and her. Not in this chapter, but later. So they'll do it. So manipulation, the last part of verse 16, behold, I have not told my father and my mother. Why would I tell you, Samson says. Oh, but there's a mistake. Not that he should have told her the riddle, but the principle. Spouses deserve better communication than parents. It's a different kind of relationship. It's more intimate than parent-child. It changes. You remember what God told us at the beginning? Leave father and mother and cleave to your wife. So it doesn't mean you don't have any relationship with your parents anymore, of course. But in the early years, I'll illustrate it with my body language here. Early years, your circle is your family of origin. Mom, dad, brothers, sisters. So you're facing them, that's your peer group. Later, it begins to spread out a little bit. You're still primarily here, but you got friends, you stay over at their house, you go on trips, things like that. So it's shifting and your horizon is expanding. Then you choose one person to marry, and then you make that commitment to build a new home. At that point, God says, leave father and mother. You got to let that fire die down. You still have a relationship with them, but nobody has enough time, energy, or talent to maintain two homes. You can't do it. So God said, I'll pick for you. You put all your energy into your new home and you build that one. Let this one die down. Leave father and mother. Now, sometimes father and mother aren't so easy to leave because they follow you or they want to be in your business all the time. I know a couple that were in our congregation. One of them grew up in our congregation. The other one came to university there, and they met and they married. They had a couple of kids. Well, his mom is a piece of work, and she moved in with him. They had moved to another state by this time. And a lot of trouble. Eventually, she broke their family up. And the daughter and the two kids moved back. And he stayed with his mom. He's a 30-year-old man. It's very sad. Did God know what he was talking about? You gotta leave, let them be. They will come to you for advice. If things are like they should be, you'll still have input in their lives. You'll still enjoy holidays with them and all that. But you put your time, energy, and talent into building this new home, build it strong so the devil can never break you out. Work on that. Right? Okay, so Samson makes a mistake here because he assumes that it's an equal relationship. I didn't even tell my parents, why would I tell you? That's backwards. He would tell her some things, not this necessarily, because of the circumstances. But all right, now we go on. Basically, he eventually tells her, and she tells them. They come back and tell him what's stronger than a lion and what's sweeter than honey. And then he says, you'd have never figured that out if you hadn't plowed with my heifer. I don't know that she liked being called a heifer or not. But plowed with heifer. That's probably not a phrase you ought to ever use in conversation. But you get the point. If you hadn't have taken it out of got my wife to get it for you, you couldn't have done it. So anyway, the Spirit of the Lord comes upon Samson. He goes down to a neighboring city and he kills 30 men and strips the slain of their clothes and brings it back and pays the bet. And it was of the Lord because he's killing Philistines. So that's the rest of that section and chapter. That gets us to chapter 15. We're going to call Judges 15 fighting fire with fire. This is where you're going to get into this revenge back and forth. The key verse is 15:15. The key thought, revenge not yourselves. That's Romans 12:17 through 19. That's a command for us. We're forbidden to revenge ourselves. God says, I'll take care of it. Let me do it. I'll do a better job with it. You'll mess it up. Don't play the venge game. The retaliation game. There are 20 verses in chapter 15, 1-8. The petulant husband. Petulant is not a word we use very much, but I like it. What does petulant mean? Anybody? Somebody online, help us out. What does petulant mean? Petty. Okay.
Like a spoiled child.
Say again, Ernest.
Like a spoiled child.
Like a spoiled child. That's a good one. A petulant husband. He's acting like a spoiled brat. Okay. What about 9-17? The Rambo warrior. Anybody old enough to remember Rambo? All right. Rambo warrior. That's 9-17. Samson's going to go off on him like Rambo. And then 18-20, the fainting hero. He's so thirsty after the battle, he's about to pass out. And God gives him water miraculously he makes a spring out of a rock, a hole in a rock. All right, so those are the keys to the chapter. Let's see if we can knock these 20 verses out. There aren't a lot of notes in this chapter anyway. Let's get Benjamin. You haven't read it, I don't think. Have you read yet? Anyway, read again if you have verse 1. Verse 1.
Yes, sir. But it came to pass within a while after, in the time of the wheat harvest, that Samson visited his wife with a kid. And he said, I will go unto my wife into the chamber. But her father would not suffer him to go in.
All right, so I forgot to say this in chapter 14. After Samson brought the sheets of clothing back and paid the bet, he went home. He didn't finish the wedding. He did not take his bride. He just got mad and went home. Now, Samson is driven by sexual urges all the way through his story. So he got home and he's like, I want to sleep with my wife, to be blunt about it. That's what verse 1 means. And so he takes a kid, that's a baby goat, right, as a gift, as an offering. This is the guy today that brings a dozen roses home, right? It's like, I'm trying to make up here. And one husband didn't do anything. He brought roses home just to be sweet, and his wife passed out. What'd you do? What have you done? Well, maybe we ought to be sweeter to our wives so she's not surprised when she gets roses. All right, the next one is driven by sexual urges. I will go in to my wife into the chamber. And then her dad wouldn't allow it. That's what the King James suffer means. You know what her dad did in the meantime? He married her off to the best man. I mean, they already had the wedding, right? And it's like, you got, the father says, well, look, we got a wedding, we got a bride, now we got no husband. You want to marry her? You want to step in? And the best man's like, yeah. So they have a wedding anyway. And now Samson didn't know that. He comes back, I want my wife. She's not really his wife, somebody else's wife. And the dad says, no, I'm sorry. You can't go into her. Well, the father offers Samson the younger sister, but Samson, he didn't want the younger sister. He wanted the woman that he wanted, you know. So he gets mad. Samson gets mad, and this begins this interesting retaliation, tit for tat, back and forth. So the first one, this is a creative guy. Samson went and caught 300 foxes. How long would it take you to catch 300 foxes? Man, it'd take me a year to catch one, right? I mean, foxes are pretty smart, right? He goes out and catches 300 foxes, just like that. And then, can you imagine doing this with two foxes? He grabs them by the tail, two of them, and ties their tails together. Man, they would eat and scratch you to death like that, right? But anyway, he does it 150 times. So he's got, can you imagine this pen of foxes? And they're all tied together. And I can just see it happening. It would be quite a mess. And then he does this. He sets all their tails on fire. Can you imagine what those foxes are doing now? And I guess he would take them over. Now it's harvest time, near harvest time. So the grain is all grown and ready to be harvested. So he takes them over one by one, like row by row. And he sets them on fire and turns them loose, sets them on fire, turns them loose. And they, of course, their tail's on fire. So what do? They run like crazy through the corn, catch everything on fire. Everything, vineyards and then the people in town are like, what? What's going on? Our crops are all burning down. And then they said, who did this? Samson. Oh boy. Samson's back. This isn't good. So retaliation number one, if you want to write that in, is here at verse 4 and 5, the foxes. Now, would you say maybe that Samson's a little out of control here? So here's a sermon called Out of Control. Anger gets out of control. Proverbs 16:32. Revenge right here gets out of control. And lust gets out of control. You can find easy examples for all those. Retaliation number 2 is in verse 6. Notice verse 5, he burned the shocks, standing corn, the vineyards, and the olives. So this is major catastrophe for an agricultural economy. Now, retaliation number 2, the Philistines came up and burned her and her father with fire. What they threatened to do before, they actually do. It wasn't even her fault or her father's fault. I mean, the father stopped him from violating his daughter's marriage, but you can hardly fault him for that, right? But they blamed them. Well, if they could have got a hold of Samson, they would have done it to him, I guess. But we're not able to do that, so they burned up his former girlfriend, and her father. Samson said, retaliation number 3. Samson said, though ye have done this, yet I will be avenged of you. Now, I wrote above this phrase, underline you wrote in verse 7, after that I will cease, not the way retaliation works. So this is the last one. No, because they're going to respond and do something, and then are you going to take that sitting down? You're not going to do anything else? That's not how retaliation works. Oh, yeah, that's how retaliation works. I'll show you. So this time he smites them hip and thigh with a great slaughter. So a lot of citizens die. And he went up and dwelt on the top of the rock Etam. Retaliation number 4 is verse 9. The Philistines spread themselves against Judah in a battle. And Judah comes and says, well, what are you doing? What did we do to you? And they said, Samson. We're mad at him, and he's hiding out in your area. So the last part of verse 10 I've underlined to do to him as he hath done to us. That's the way retaliation works. So you got a contrast between the end of verse 7 and the end of verse 10. That's not how retaliation works, verse 7. That is how it works. We're going to do to him what he did to us. We're going to pay him back. Now, Samson responds, as they did to me, so I've done to them. That's how it works. So what's happening here is the men of Judah come up and talk to Samson. They say, man, we got a war going on here. What can we do? What's happening here? And he says, well, and he explains what's going on. And then they say, well, we need to tie you up and turn you over to them so they'll go away. And Samson says, well, make me a promise that you won't kill me yourselves and I'll let you do it. And they said, we promise. And they keep that promise. They tie him up and hand him over to the Philistines. Now that gets you down to verse 14. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him mightily. So he's one man tied up in the midst of all the Philistine army. And he broke off of his arms the ropes as if they had been flax burned in a fire. You ever taken a weed, like a dried weed, stuck it over a fire? How long does it last? Just no time at all. I mean, you just like broken so easily. And he broke those ropes like that. So he found somehow the jawbone of a donkey. Maybe as they're walking along, going back to Philistia, he crosses a ditch, maybe where they had buried a donkey at one point, and there's a bone sticking out. And right about the time maybe that's why he broke the ropes when he did, broke the ropes, picked up the jawbone of an ass. How big would the jawbone of a donkey be?
Must be pretty strong.
Yeah, it would be a strong bone, maybe 10 inches, would you think, something like that? So he's holding it at one end and he's swinging it. You know how many people he killed with a bone? 1,000 people. So can you imagine how that? I try to picture this. He's like there in the middle of them, and he picks up the bone and he hits one of them right off before he even knows what's happening. Then the rest of them are like, oh wow, we got to fight. So they come at him one at a time, and he's just 1,000 people laying around, corpses. I guess they're spread over an area. He's running and conking them over the head with it. And then one by one, they're all 1,000 men die. And there's one mighty warrior, Samson. That's the Rambo warrior, right? That's Rambo right there. Except this is real. Rambo they made up and staged, but this is real. All right, so your key verse is verse 15. That gets us down to after it's over, he cast away the jawbone. Didn't even keep it for a souvenir. I think if I had done something with a jawbone, I think I'd put it back for my museum later. Right? But he just throws it away. And now that's when he's thirsty. So that's verse 18. This is the brass rule. Do you know the golden rule, the silver rule, the brass rule? Golden rule is doing to others as you would have them do unto you. Silver rule is doing to others as they do unto you. Brass rule is doing to others before they do unto you. So it's the aggressive one. That's what he does here. The brass rule is verse 18. Now verse 19, God clave a hollow place that was in the jaw. Jaw there means a cavity or a socket, and it's a play on words. He used the jawbone, and so this place where the water comes out looks like a jaw somehow. It's a cavity, like a jaw would have a cavity in it. The name in Hachior means the spring of the crier, the end of verse 19. And back up in verse 17, Ramoth Lehi, that name means lifting of the jawbone. So they're commemorating the event that happens here by giving this place a name, these places a name. So he says, I'm going to thirst to death, verse 18, and fall into the hand of the uncircumcised if I don't get some water. So God provides that for him. And his spirit came again, he revived. He was dehydrated. And so he judged Israel the days of the Philistines 20 years. So that last verse tells you that a lot of time is passing and nothing major is happening. They're sort of at a truce here. Because Samson's a hero among the Jews. He is public enemy number one among the Philistines, but they're just sort of standing in their own area, not fighting. That gets us to chapter 16. And I think we'll take our break here. So let's take a 2-minute break or thereabouts and come back and we're going to try to finish the book of Judges before lunch. We may go a little after lunch, but I hope not. I'd love to have 3 hours for Ruth. We can do it in 1 hour if we have to, but I'd rather give you 3 hours in Ruth. There's some good stuff there. So let's take our break. We'll come back. We're making pretty good pace this morning so far. So.
Good visuals today. Thank you.
Painting pictures, word pictures.
Have you seen these AI generated movies?
No.
These chapters, unbelievable stuff.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
It's wild. Well, I haven't really looked it up for Judges, but during Daniel, I was looking up some of those. I gotta send you some.
I need to
stuff.
do that in Ezekiel
Why?
because some of that stuff I have trouble picturing.
I mean,
And chapter 1 is like, wow, what in the world is all that?
What
You know?
is
Yeah. It might be very helpful to be able to watch that one movie.
Or you've gotta, I read it in depth
Right.
numerous times before I delved into the video.
Take it with a grain of salt.
Pretty close? Yeah. It was.
Yeah, Old Testament, they don't tend to miss. It's usually more accurate.
I mean, like that, what is it, Daniel chapter 7? Well,
Oh, yeah, that's when it moves into Daniel's visions, 7 to 12.
I mean,
With the 4 different creatures.
the beasts, the beasts coming out of the ocean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm gonna give you a nightmare.
I'm gonna have to send you that. Well, when you read it, it's hard to.
Oh, you want to turn this off?
I appreciate that.
Uh-oh, I fell. Sorry.
Advise. All right, Chip's
All right.
got us started back. So let's get into chapter 16. Cycle 8 continues. In 16, we're calling this chapter Samson and Delilah. One of the most famous, I started to say love stories, but I'm not sure there's a lot of love in this chapter, but one of the most famous stories in the Bible, couple stories. The key verse is 16:17. The key thought, don't play with sin. Samson, true to his playboy personality, is just playing with sin here. Adrenaline rush, close to the edge, that kind of personality. Well, it's going to catch up to him in chapter 16. The outline, 31 verses, 1 to 3 is trapped. And he breaks out of that trap. 4 to 20, the largest part of the chapter, enticed. 21 to 25, imprisoned. And 26 to 31, buried. This is the demise of Samson. He goes down in flames. He lived quite an interesting life, but it was not a long life. Isn't that pretty typical of that personality type and that kind of life? All right, let's go into the verses and let's see, Patrick, would you mind reading for us? Do verses 1 through 3. 1 through 3, please, sir.
All right. Now Samson went to Gaza and saw a harlot there and went in to her. When the Gazites were told, Samson has come here, they surrounded the place and lay in wait for him all night at the gate of the city. They were quiet all night, saying, in the morning, when it is daylight, we will kill him. And Samson lay low till midnight. Then he arose at midnight, took hold of the doors of the gate of the city and the two gateposts, put them up, bar and all, put them on his shoulders, and carried them to the top of the hill that faces Hebron.
All right, another one of these famous Samson stories. There's several things here to notice in passing. You have lust of the eyes again. In verse 1, he saw an harlot. He went in unto her, that's the lust of the flesh. And you will see the pride of life in verse 10. So all three of the avenues of sin, Samson travels. He knows all about the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. So Gazites are in the city of Gaza, right? So that's a Philistine city. And they find out that he's in that house with a harlot. He's spending the night in that woman's house. So they circle it and they say, well, we'll get him in the morning when he comes out. Only thing is, Samson doesn't stay all night. So evidently, they fell asleep during the night at midnight. And they figured, well, we'll wake up and catch him in the morning. But he leaves at midnight, so he sneaks by them and gets away. Now, he circumvented their plan, and they think they've got him trapped in the city, like they locked the gates, so he can't get out. Samson says, that's not a problem. So he just grabs a hold of the gate, rips it out of the wall, and carries it, no doubt, thinking, how are you going to get it back? He carries it all the way up the hill. Now, not all the way to Hebron, I don't think. Hebron's 9 miles away. I guess Samson could have done that, but it says before Hebron. So I think that means in the direction of the road that goes to Hebron. He carries it up a hill and puts it up there, probably where they could see it in the morning when they get up there. Where's our gate? Oh, look, it's up there on the hill. Samson is hilarious. So he gets away. They don't get to kill him like they intended. So they were plotting murder here, but they fall down. Now, in the last part of verse 4, he loved a woman whose name was Delilah. If this were a movie, this would be an ominous soundtrack. This will be the end of Samson. Delilah, he finally met his match. Delilah is not as strong as Samson, but she figures out how to bring him down. That gets us to verse number 5. Who was reading? Was it Patrick? Were you reading? Will you read
Yes.
Verse 5, please, sir?
All right. And the lords of the Philistines came up to her and said to her, entice him and find out where his great strength lies, and by what means we may overpower him, that we may bind him to afflict him. And every one of us will give you 1,100 pieces of silver.
Well, there's a lot to unpack in this verse. Let's start with the phrase entice him. Are they married? No, so that's a bad thing. If they were married, it would be a good thing. So some things are good in one place and bad in another. You know that mulch, like dirty, muddy mulch, is really good in your flower bed. But if somebody brought it in on your new white carpet in your living room and dumped it out, it'd be bad there, wouldn't it? Well, that's the way enticement is, the sexual aspect of humanity. It's good in marriage. God intended it to be there. God gave it as a gift. Enjoy it, but not before and not with somebody outside of. Put it where, it's like the mulch in the rose garden. It's good there, but not before and not after or with someone else. Now, another note in verse 5, I underlined to afflict him. She knew what they intended. they're going to hurt him. They want to kill him. And Delilah, does she really love Samson?
No.
She doesn't. She doesn't care about him. I mean, she knows what they intend to do to him, and she participates. He is in love with her. She is in love with money. True or false? Yeah, they say, we'll pay you. And so she's okay. she's in love with money. And how she can get that money is through Samson, through turning him over. You know, it requires her immorality, it seems. It requires her deceit. But she's willing to do whatever it takes to get that. Every one of us, 1,100 pieces of silver. So that's a good chunk of change. It's not just 1,100 pieces, times however many people there are. So there's a lot of money at stake here. So verse 6 is interesting. Tell me, I pray thee, wherein thy great strength lieth, and wherewith thou mightest be bound to afflict thee. She's not too subtle there, is she? I don't know if she's not so sharp herself, or she just thinks that Samson will think she's kidding. I don't know how she takes this, but she says, if somebody wanted to hurt you, how could they do that?
Maybe she's playing to his pride.
Maybe she is. And he definitely followed, because he's about to know exactly that it's for real. Because let's watch the next one. He tells her, if you tie me up with 7 bowstrings, or King James has green withs that were never dried, I'll be like any other man, as weak as anybody. So guess what happens? Verse 8, the Philistines brought her the 7 green bowstrings with, they'd never been dried. She bound him. So it's probably a game. She presents it like a game. Samson, let me tie you up. Can I tie you up? And okay, tie me up. Well, then notice what she does, verse 9. There were men. Where were the men?
In her room.
Abiding with her in the chamber.
They were in there. They weren't outside waiting to be called. They were in the private quarters. I guess it was, I don't really know how that many men could have been hidden, but there they are. Maybe it's a really big room, and maybe there's a closet or something.
Really is dumb.
Yeah, you see what happens.
Line.
The Philistines be upon thee, Samson, and they come out of the woodwork in the room, and they grab him. And he's like laughing. He's smiling to himself. He goes, snap. He breaks it right off, and he whoops them all. You know, they can't get him. And then Delilah, I mean, Samson, if he had any sense at all, what would he have done right here? It's like, see you, lady. Like, I'm out of here. But he's playing with fire. So, verse 10, Samson, you mock me, you tell me lies. You don't play fair. Well, you're not fine. Well, she's pretty good at what she does, isn't she?
I imagine she's really pretty.
I bet she is. The Samson probably doesn't hang out with ugly women, you think?
I wouldn't think so.
Not his top.
Got the pick of the litter, I guess.
He said unto her, if they bind me fast with new ropes. Every time he gets a little closer to the truth. So now he's like, new ropes. And she brings the ropes. And Samson, the liars and weights were in the chamber, verse 12. And he broke them off his arms like a thread. Delilah said to Samson, you mocked me again, told me lies. And he said, now tell me if this one's getting pretty close to the truth. If thou weavest the 7 locks of my head with the web. Now he's down to the hair. That's where the strength is, right? So I don't really understand what this web. The web is a loom, like you might weave clothes with. So how long would his hair be if it had never been cut in his whole life? He's got a lot of hair. I don't know if he's got it tied up somehow, but she brings this instrument, whatever it is, and she weaves it into the pieces of the loom. And then she fastened it with a pin and said, "The Philistines be upon thee, Samson." Man, this guy's dumb as a load of bricks. It's like they're trying to kill you, Samson. And he waked out of his sleep, so he fell asleep when she was playing with his hair.
Blinded by pride, it seems. Killed the lion.
I'm not worried about anything. I'm a He-Man.
Yeah.
And then she said to him, how can you say you love me when your heart is not with me? She's playing on those emotions now. She's manipulation. Does she love him? No. Well, she's saying, "Well, you don't love me," but she doesn't love him. So, anyway, I put quotes around that. Heart is not with me. That would be a sermon right there. You know, you could do marriage, you could do friendship, you could do brothers in the church. We need to love from the heart. Your heart's not with me. Well, the Jews' hearts were not in their worship, Matthew 15:7. And it came to pass when she pressed him daily. What's happening here?
Wearing him down,
What does that word say?
nagging.
She's nagging him every day, right? He's wearing him down, like Pat said, wearing him down. And every day it's like he's getting tired. He's like, men like to please women, right? And she's like, you never please me. You don't do what I want. Why don't you do what I want? Over and over, wearing him down. And she urged him. You got to do it. She's persuading him. And notice the last part of verse 17. You remember how strong Samson was physically? How about on the inside? How strong was he?
Bigly.
His soul was vexed unto death. She beat him on the inside. She could have never beat him in an arm wrestling contest, but she could wear down his resolve in his mind. And that's what she did. You got some verses there from Proverbs about that. Now your key verse is 17. And he told her, all his heart. Samson, don't you know that they're waiting to kill you? And he said unto her, there hath not come a razor upon mine head. This long hair I got is not just my style. It's my strength. There's a reason why my hair is so long. I have been a Nazarite unto God from my mother's womb. Would she have known anything about the Nazarite law? Delilah is not a Jew, is she? She didn't know about that. So, if I be shaven, my strength will go from me, and I shall become weak, and like any other man. Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart. She finally broke his will. She caused the Philistines. They bring the money. She made him fall asleep on her knees. He's pretty brave. The Philistines are all around trying to kill him, and he's just conked out there on his girlfriend's lap. And she called for a man, and she caused him to shave off the 7 locks of his head. So evidently he had 7 rubber bands on his hair, 7 locks, and one by one shaved them off. Now this guy's asleep while he's doing that. Pretty heavy sleeper. All right, and notice what this next phrase is. I underline this. She began to afflict him. That's pretty cold-blooded right there, isn't it? She's pretending to love him, and as soon as she gets the opportunity, she begins to afflict him. I don't know what that means. Is she hitting him with some hammer? Is she piercing him with a needle? Is she nicking him with a knife? I don't know what she's doing to afflict him, but she's getting off on hurting him physically. And his strength went from him. So here's the sermon beginning at verse 19. What flirting with sin cost Samson. What flirting with sin cost Samson. Do you think young people need to hear this sermon?
Yes, sir.
They need discernment. And some older people do too. So some personality types do. But often it's more young people because there's not as much foolishness once people get older, especially when they settle down and get married with kids. They tend to be more reserved and careful and cautious when they're reckless in their youth. So this is recklessness. What flirting with sin cost Samson? Number one, it cost him his strength. And that was important to Samson. Do you know any women who their beauty is their world? Their beauty? Yeah. Well, with Samson, strength was his world. That's what he took his glory in. And once he lost that, he didn't have his purpose. He didn't have his self-image was shattered. All right. So number two, I'm going to stop, pause just a minute before I forget to give you this. Take a picture of that if you want it. Those who never gave in. Now, Samson gave in, so we don't respect him. But don't you have a lot of respect for these four people? Or some of them are group. One of them is a group. Joseph never gave. Did Joseph ever give in to Potiphar's wife? Did Vashti give in to her powerful husband, Esther? Did the three Hebrew youths, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, give in Daniel? No, they went in the fire, but they didn't bow, they didn't burn. They didn't bow, they didn't bend, they didn't bow, they didn't burn. And then Jesus never gave in. So there's a great positive sermon to show a contrast with Samson, who eventually did give in. Now we get back down to our sermon. So it cost him his strength. Number two, it cost him his relationship with the Lord. The Lord departed from him. That's the most important loss of all. Number three, it cost him his eyes, his sight. Verse 21, put out his eyes. I try to picture how they did that. Somebody held him down because a man would never let you do that to him, but they held his head stable enough to be able to stick a knife in his eyes or a hot poker or something. It's an awful thought. Well, number four, it cost him his citizenship. They brought him down to Gaza. It cost him his freedom. They bound him with fetters of brass. And it cost him his energy. He had to grind in the prison house. They made a manual slave out of him. But there would be a different soundtrack for verse 22. Howbeit, the hair of his head began to grow again. Well, they shouldn't have let that happen, right? They should have made sure he had a barber in prison. Don't let his hair grow out. But they're foolish because they think they got him now. They got him in the prison. His eyes are put out. He's no threat to us. We have, what do you do with a snake to keep them from being a poisonous snake? You defamed them. They think they've defamed him because he don't have his eyes and all that. All right, that gets us then down to verse 25. So they have this holiday and everybody's off work and they all gather at the stadium and they say, well, bring Samson out. Let him make sport for us. What do they got him out there doing? Lifting weights, breaking cement blocks, fighting against three men at a time. I don't know, but they got him making sport. Now, they enjoy this because he terrorized them for so long. He was like public enemy number one. Everybody's afraid of him. They whispered out about Samson to their kids, And now they got Samson and they want to enjoy some laughs at his expense. So they bring him out. He makes sport. And they got a little boy that shows him where to go, leads him because he can't see where to walk. So the little boy leads this strong man around, said, okay, watch your step here. We're going down, whatever. And then after the sport is over, maybe everybody's eating upstairs, lunchtime or something. So they got him underneath the stadium. And all the important people, 3,000 people, are up there, like your mayors and rich people and everybody that's anybody has come to this feast or come to this holiday. And so he says to the little boy, let me show me where the posts are, the pillars that hold up this building. We would say the weight-bearing pillars. Little boy doesn't know anything about what he's going to do, you know. So he says, okay, well, put your hand, let me have your hand. He puts it on one post. Let me have your other hand. And he puts it on the other post. He says, okay, those are your two posts. And then Samson, all the lords are there, 3,000. Now, before we leave this screen, when Samson was fighting people on the battlefield and killing Philistines, how many of these 3,000 people were out there? It wouldn't have been. Why? They're important. You don't put your rich guys out there on the front line, and your mayor's not out there, your politicians. No, the ones that are in the front line are your young people, your young men. They're not important. They're fodder for the cannons. Well, he would have never been able to reach and kill any of these people when he was a soldier fighting. But now God put him in a place to cut the head off the snake. So Samson called unto the Lord, O Lord God, verse 28, remember me, I pray thee, and strengthen me. I pray thee only this once. One more time, let me be strong. And, oh God, that I may at once be avenged of the Philistines. Why did Samson hate worse about what they had done to him? In his eyes, that I may be avenged from my two eyes.
It's interesting. He finally comes to the Lord at this point.
He does. Yeah. You know, prison will do that to people. And bad health will do. Going blind will do that to people.
That's right. Blinded Saul, huh?
Yeah, Saul's our example there. So he, in verse 30, let me die with the Philistines. And he bowed himself with all of his might on those two pillars. And he broke the pillars, and so he brought down the building. And the building landed on top of him, so he died. But all those people that were up there in the building, they fell in, and the building fell on them, or they died from falling from height. So he slew more in his death than he slew in his life. And his brethren and all the house of his father came down and took him. They found his body and brought him up and buried him between Zorah. You remember when the story started, where we were? Zorah and Eshtaol. We've come full circle. And he's going back home to be buried. Where the story started, it ended. In the burying place of Manoah's father, and he judged Israel 20 years. He's the last judge of the book. The last judge, number 13. Now what we're doing in chapter 17, we're beginning the appendix of Judges. What is an appendix? Not the part of your body. An appendix in a book.
The information was in the book.
Yes, but it's not like a table of contents. Where is an appendix usually?
Introduction.
Nope.
Here.
It's an addition to the book. It's in the back. Usually it's in the back. And it may say, like in this book that I'm writing, has an appendix. One of the chapters mentions that alcohol causes cancer and diseases. And there's a long list of diseases caused by alcohol. So instead of putting that in the middle of that chapter, all that technical, I wanted it to be accessible. So I just put a note, see Appendix 1, and we'll put page 218 or whatever. So it'll be in the back. So this is an appendix. It's an add-on, in addition to the story of the book. Now, let me give you an overview. We're not going to be able to do as much in the appendix. Let's see. So what this section covers These are each chapter 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. So what each one of these chapters contributes to the story of the book. So this is a summary, a supplement. Judges 17:3, how idolatry came to be in Israel. How in the world would the people of God have idolatry among them? Then 17:8, how idolatry came to be in Ephraim, the bad boys tribe, right? Number 3, chapter 18, how idolatry came to be in Dan. Chapter 19, the most shameful acts of Benjamin. 20, Benjamin almost extinguished. They killed almost all of the whole tribe, only 600 men left. And then Judges 21, Benjamin preserved. They had to get them some wives because there were no women in the tribe left. So they were going to die out, no babies. So they get them wives. Yeah, well, that's on the screen there. This is related to chapter 17 context, but family sins to avoid. Don't ever commit these sins like this chapter reveals being committed against the family. Number one, never steal from your family. Drugs do that. I went to the hospital to visit a man who was beaten nearly to death. He was a member of our congregation. The doctor said one more blow to the head, he would have died. You know who beat him up that bad? His son, who was living with him. He was stealing from his parents to support his drug habit. They knew it, so they put a lock on their bedroom door because they both worked. Like a lock, what do you call that with a key? Deadbolt lock. Well, that made, his emotions were crazy with the drugs anyway. I don't remember what he was on. Anyway, he came in, found the door locked, and he got so mad. He hid behind the door with a baseball bat. When his dad came home, when they came home, he hit him and started beating him with a baseball bat in his head. The mom had sense enough to get out of the house and go to the neighbor and call the police. It's a beautiful story of forgiveness stuff. His dad lived, they were members of the congregation, and he became a member of the congregation. Forgiveness of God. And on Sundays, you know where the son sits? Probably still sits with his parents. He's divorced, drugs, right? And but he sits with his parents. Don't ever steal from your parents. I rode around with a policeman we have in our congregation, had at that time, on the night patrol, Friday night patrol. Well, pretty interesting. Anniston, Alabama. I think we went out like 11 till 4 or something. He talked to me about drugs because we had some arrests. He said people were huffing paint cans. You ever seen that? That was weird. Poor man's drugs, I guess. But anyway, he said once somebody starts using drugs, they will go to jail. It's just a matter of how long. He said that what they do to start with is to steal from their parents because their parent and their family, because their parents won't turn them in. So they can get away with it. But then eventually they steal everything they can steal, or they put a stop to it. Then they'll steal from somebody else. That's usually when they go to jail to support the habit. Anyway, that's what you see here. Then number 2, never curse in front of your child. That's in verse 2. Where do a lot of kids learn how to learn the bad words? Dad, and sometimes from mom. Some women curse worse than men nowadays. Number 3, never condone evil in your child. Don't make excuses for your child's bad behavior. Punish bad behavior because you're condoning it, you're reinforcing it. They're not going to change that bad behavior. All right, we got to go fast. So I always I'm gonna go slow. Idolatry in Israel is the title for chapter 17. Your key verse is 17:5. The key thought: never condone evil in your children. Key or the outline of the chapter, the three key points. It's 13 verses. Amoral Micah. We're introduced to this man Micah, so you might mark him in verse 1. That's what this chapter is about. What does amoral mean? The alpha negative does what?
Without morals.
That's it. It negates it. Like if you say he's a moral man, he's a good moral man. What do you mean by that? He's a good man. But if he's amoral, that's the opposite. I mean, he doesn't have any morals. So that's the way Micah was, amoral. 7 to 12, a hired Levite. So he hires a Levite to lead his idolatrous worship. And then 13, he thinks God will be happy with that. So misunderstood God. You see how far they got away from understanding God? Well, God's going to bless me now because I got a Levite that helps me in my idol worship. You just scratch your head about that. It's like, God is never going to bless any idolatrous worship. Doesn't matter who's doing it. So that's those are the three lessons. I'm not going to go through this chapter and give you lessons, but you can mark Micah's house of God in verse 5. And 5 and 6 are your key verses in this chapter. And I'll give you this one sermon idea from verse 11. So what happens in the meantime is a Levite leaves Judah, Jerusalem, down where they would normally live, and he's on a trip. It's like a young man going out adventurous, finding a new life. So he gets to this place where Micah is. Micah says, "You want a job? Well, yeah, I'll take your job. What? So I'll give you a change of clothes. I'll pay you so much. You can live with me. Everything we take care of. You be my priest or my idol that I made." He stole money from his mama. Later he confessed it. She said, "Just keep it." He made an idol out of it. And then he set up a place to worship his idol. And he had his son being his priest, but now he got a better job. He got a better one, he thinks, got a Levite. And so he becomes his priest. So anyway, that Levite was content to dwell with him. Should he have been content to live in a house of idols? No. All right, so here's your lesson. Never be content with false religion. Keep looking. If what you're being taught and what's being practiced is not in the Bible, keep looking. Don't be content in false religion. Number 2, never be content in sin. Number 3, never be content in an evil environment. You know, if you're in Sodom, do you really want to live there forever? Let's get out of there. Okay, let's get out of there. So never be content with false religion, sin, evil environment. All right, that gets us to chapter 18. Chapter 18 is called Idolatry in Dan. That's one of the tribes, of course. Key verse 18:30. He thought, "It is no small thing to set up a rival religion with God's." You think anybody somewhere in the world this week said, "Let's start us a new church"? So they meet with some people, their friends or whatever. They go to a coffee shop and they say, "What kind of church do you want to have? Let's start us a new one." And so they start kicking it around, and the second cup of coffee, the third cup of coffee. So they got it all sketched out on a napkin. Right, this is what we're going to call it. These are our doctrines. This is going to be our pastor. They got it all planned out. Do they have a permit to build that church? If you started building a church building in your community and the city inspector pulls up and he said, "Let me see your permit." And you say, "Oh, well, I own this property. I didn't get a permit. And he said, stop right where you are. You can't build a church without a permit. This has got to go through the city council. It's got to go through the board of governors. Stop here and go get your permit. You can't even build a church building without a permit. Do you think you can start a new church without a permit? The only one that can give you a permit to start a new church is God. He only ever gave one permit to one person to build a church, his son. And everybody else in the world that ever built a church did so with no permit. And every one of them is a rival to his son's church. Because if you got a church building, a church meeting in your community, and you're a religiously minded person, you say, I need to be a member of a church. It's where you're going to go. Well, there's one right down at the end of our street. And you go there and they're friendly and it feels pretty good. And you say, okay, well, I found my church. And you don't know that that church is operating without a license. That God doesn't recognize that church. Are you going to keep looking for another church? What they've done is create a rival for the real church to keep people from finding the real church. So the devil couldn't stop the church from being established. What the devil did instead was create a whole bunch of other churches so it will be lost in the middle of all of them. And fewer people will find it. Devil's pretty smart. So that's what you learn here. It's no small thing to set up a rival religion to God's. Now you got 31 verses, you got 5 sections, 1 to 6 discontented Danites. So they're like, we don't have enough property. Let's go find us some more land. 7 to 10, carefree Laish. Laish is a city. And carefree, it means that they don't have any worries, but they also don't have any protection. They don't have a wall. They don't have a government. They don't have an army. So it seems pretty good. Got no bosses, right? They don't have to pay any taxes. It's a pretty good situation until, guess what? They get attacked. Then they got nobody to protect them. They got no wall around the city. Now, 11 to 21 is a stolen priest. So the Danites are going to scout it out. Then they're going to go back and tell the people in Dan, hey, we found this guy, Micah, and he's got an idol made out of silver. He's got a priest in there, and he doesn't have any protection. So you know the plan is we're going to go up there and steal his idol. And when they get there, they make so he hired him a priest. He has a hireling priest. What does a hireling priest value? Money. So guess what? When they get there, they say, you want to be our preacher? He says, yeah, we'll pay you more. And it's a bigger church, right? You got one little family here. You can go with us and you're a whole tribe. What's going to be interesting is, we probably won't read this verse, but later they replace him anyway. So he didn't get to keep his position, but he went with them. So the guy, Micah, that he's leaving is upset about that. And he walks down the road chasing after him and says, sort of like weeping, you took my God. You took my preacher. And they say, you better go home or we're going to kill you. It's going to be worse for you. So he turns around and goes home. But, any God that somebody can take away from you is not really a God. Right? Yes, Ernest.
Yeah. We had an incident here in the Philippines several years ago. And let's be honest, missionaries, you're always struggling for money to get ahead, trying to get things caught up. And we had this happen. We had a guy come to us and say, look, we've got the people and we can fully fund your work, but you're going to have to preach a faith-only doctrine.
Wow.
And the answer was no, I can't do that.
Yeah. Wow.
Can I say that everybody would have had the same answer? And I think, no, they wouldn't have.
Yeah, isn't that something? Wow. That would be a temptation, but You might as well close up shop and go home if you're not going to teach what saves people. Then 22 to 29, angry fellows. 30, 31, idolatrous tribe. That's how idolatry came to be in Israel, is through this family Micah and then them taking over his idol. They kept the idol. They didn't melt it back down into silver and use it for money. They kept the idol. All right. You might note that Josephus, Jewish historian, puts this chapter after chapter 1, verse 10. So remember we said in the introduction that these chapters in the appendix happened not after Samson, like they come in the book, but they happened at other places during the period of the Judges. So this is very early, chapter 1. If after Samson, then Phinehas, who's mentioned here, who's Moses' grandson, would have been 350 years old. So obviously this is much earlier in history, all the way back closer to the time of Joshua than at the end of the time of Samson. All right, I'm not going to be able to cover that with you, but let's go down. I won't be able to give you that for that. I tell you what, I will give you this one though. This is beside verse 19, where Micah is saying, what are you doing? When they show up to steal his idol, and he says, what do you? Oh, what are you doing? And they said, you better shut up. You better not be asking us questions. Hold your peace. Lay thine hand upon thy mouth and go with us. That's the Levites. Go with us and be to us a father and a priest. It is better for thee to be a priest. Is it better for thee to be a priest to a house of one man or to be a priest for a tribe and a family in Israel? So they make the Levite a better offer, and that's where a hireling will always take the better offer. So he goes with them. So they tell him, we'll give you a better deal. So just hush, hush. Now, here's a sermon off of that phrase, lay that hand upon thy mouth. When should you put your hand on your mouth? Which means stop speaking, right? When you're tempted to speak evil of another person. Stop right there. Put your hand on your mouth. Because James 4:11 says don't do that. What about whenever you're tempted to gossip or to lie? Put your hand on your mouth. Don't do that. Exodus 23:13. What about when you want to tell the dirty story? Perversity. Put your hand on your mouth. 1 Timothy 6:5. What about when you want to blaspheme God? Better put your hand on your mouth. Mark 3:29. What about idle words? That one is, we don't talk about idle words much, do we? Matthew 12:34-35. And here's the last one. When you don't know all the facts, should you be talking about it? A lot of criticism of elders falls into that one right there. Elders have privy to information that they use to make decisions that they cannot share with the congregation. And then the congregation, not knowing all the facts, spouts off. Well, they shouldn't have done that. They did this. I don't agree with that. If they had had the facts the elders had at the time, they would have made the same decision. Be careful about spouting off against your elders. Now, are elders perfect? No. Okay. Is there ever a time when they need to be corrected? Yes. But generally speaking, if we knew the facts, we would support their position. All right. I've never been an elder, so I'm not grinding any stone for myself. My dad was an elder. I've worked closely with elders. I have friends who are elders. I've never been an elder, but I've seen that enough to know that's the case. And usually the people making the criticisms are not your strongest Christians. They are immature, they're weak, they're selfish, they're prideful. Not always, but usually that's the case. All right, now let's move into verse 24. I'm not going to give you these two, but if you want a picture of it, this is wisdom that Micah learned the hard way. For instance, if your God can be stolen from you, you don't really have a God. That's the kind of things he learned. And then wisdom is the better part of valor. That's a famous statement, right? It's better not to have to fight than to win the fight. So wisdom is the better part of valor. And that's what you learn in this section when Dan says, shh, go home and leave. You better get home before something bad happens. And so he goes home. Lest angry fellows run upon thee. That's a threat. If you don't go back home and you push this, then angry fellows are going to run all over you. We're going to attack you. You'll die. Is that what you want? So that's the second sermon. And then I made a list of angry fellows over here. These are Bible characters that had anger issues. Cain all the way down to Absalom there. Now, I wrote this note for the preachers. If you're going to preach this, you can't just tell those stories about why they got mad. You got to ask why each one. Well, you can't just tell the story about them. You got to ask the question, why did they get mad? And what will happen is you will find different applications to people today. Why do people get mad today? Their pride's been hurt. They're selfish. Whatever. There's a lot of reasons. All right. I think verse 27, 28 is interesting. It says they burnt the city and then they built a city right back. And they just live in the city that was already built. I don't know, but that's what they did. They burned Laish, the carefree city that had no protection, and then they built the city as well. Your key verse is verse 30. Dan is the first tribe to have idols. There were individuals who worshiped idols earlier, but this is the first tribe to have idols. And then notice I told you that the Levite took the better offer and then he lost his job. Here's where that happens. Jonathan, the son of Gershom, son of Manasseh, he and his sons were priests. So what happened to that other guy? We don't know, but he doesn't have his job anymore. The Levite was soon replaced. Be careful of easy come because easy come is often easy go. An acquisition between businesses, like one big business acquires another, buys them out. Often what happens is the workers in this, when they got bought out, we'll keep all your jobs. You don't have to worry about that. And then about 6 months later, so we're downsizing. And you know who's downsized? All those employees that were with the other company. Well, that's what happens here. Then in verse 31, and they set them up Micah's graven image, which he had made all the time, that the house of God was in Shiloh. It's no small thing to set up a rival religion to God. That's where you see that lesson, verse 31. Now, chapter 19, the darkest day of the Dark Ages. The darkest day of the Dark Ages. The whole period of the Judges is the Dark Ages. But if you had to say one day is the worst day of that whole 350 years, it's chapter 19.
Hey, what was the title of 18? I didn't write that down for some reason.
Idolatry in Dan. Idolatry in Dan. All right, your keys to chapter 19, key verse 19:29. He thought a foolish man offers his wife or daughters to the lust of other men. A foolish man offers his wife or daughters to the lust of other men. Does that ever happen today, or is that just an Old Testament thing? Oh, it happens all the time. You let your wife go out dressed inappropriately, what's going to happen in the minds of the men who see her? What about your daughters? They go out, they're going to go to school or to the beach or to the mall or wherever. You're a man, you know what men think about women wearing those clothes. You're going to let your daughter wear those clothes? And so men can think that about your daughters? Be careful about that. You got to have guts to be a dad, because your daughter's not going to like you to tell her, go change your clothes. I've done that. Well, I'm a good daughter. I've done that. And they'll later thank you for it, or they'll release the resentment about it. But the better thing to do is teach them ahead of time, which we did, but sometimes they're still tempted. And sometimes they don't see how tight jeans are as a problem compared to, showing all their legs. They don't really think about it like that. So anyway, you don't want to do what he did here. Outline 1 to 4, retrieving concubine in the 4th month. That'll make more sense when we get there. 5 to 11, a late start on the 5th day. 12 to 25, a long night in Gibeah. It's a very sad thing. And then 26 to 30, a day like no other. That's when he cuts up his wife in 12 pieces. Or his concubine. All right, so you want to get a picture of that, or you need a little more time to get all that information? Maybe you got it all. Anybody need more time? Benjamin, you got all that?
Yes, sir, I got it.
All right. Well, let's dive into it. This is a 30-verse chapter, so we'll just hit the highlights here. But notice in verse 1, when there was no king in Israel. We saw it 17 verse 6. You remember that when we marked this as a key verse? In those days, there was no king in Israel. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes. The last verse of the book will say the same thing. There is no king in Israel. So we have that in verse 1. Now, here is a man who is of the tribe of, guess who's back? Living on the side of Mount Ephraim, took a concubine out of Bethlehem, Judah. That's like Birmingham, Alabama right there. Or Atlanta, Georgia. You see that Bethlehem is the city, Judah is the country, the state, the larger area. All right, so you can mark his concubine played the whore. That means she left him and found other lovers. And she stayed gone for 4 months. Finally, he goes to find her, bring her back home. But she's gone down to her father's house. She's living at her father's house now. So he shows up down there, and the father's never met him. Her father's never met him. He's glad to meet him. I don't know if they talked about her escapades or not, but she's back home. She probably didn't tell her father what she's been doing. Husband knows what she's been doing, but he's going to bring her back home and give her a second chance. So he goes and visits on the 4th day. He's like, okay, we got to be getting home. And the father-in-law says, no, don't go leave so soon. Don't leave so soon. So he stays another day. And they ate and drank and visited. And then he got up the next day to leave, verse 7. And the fifth day, and the damsel's father said, no, don't leave yet. Don't leave yet. So he stays until lunch. Now, he could have made the trip all the way back home in one day if he had a full day. But he left at lunch, so he only had a half day. So that's going to play a role in this story. So, as it drew toward evening, he said, stay all night. And the man would not tarry that night. So most of the day is gone. It's toward evening, not just lunch. And he said, no, we're not staying the other night. We're going to leave. So he leaves late in the day, and he's not going to make it all the way home. So they got to stay over somewhere along the way. That's where the problem comes. So they come to Jebus, which later is called Jerusalem, and they're going to stay there. But the servant that he had traveling with him said, no, the servant said, yes, let's stay here in the city of the Jebusites. Jebusites were not believers in God. They were Gentiles. They were pagans. And so the man says, no, this is a pagan city. We should go on and stay among our brethren somewhere. Well, that's actually didn't work out so well. Probably would have been way better off to stay in Jebus. But anyway, they go on down, And they get to, we'll pass over to Gibeah. And then he said, "Sir, come and let us draw near to one of those places to lodge all night in Gibeah or maybe in Ramah." So they get to Gibeah, that's where they end up staying. And it belongs to Benjamin. That's a key point here, because the Benjamites are going to defend the city of Gibeah for their terrible sin. But if the Benjamites had just been righteous and turned the city over to be punished for what they did, there wouldn't have been a war. But they decide they'll dig their heels in and defend the city of Gibeah, and that starts a war. And now all of them eventually die, except 600, all because they're stubborn in defending sin. But we're getting ahead of the story. So you get to verse 15, they go into Gibeah. No man would give them a place to stay. So they're going to sleep out in the street. And there are wicked people in this city who decide that they want to rape them, rape the man, homosexual rape. Well, there's an old man that comes in, he's been out in the field, and he sees them out in the street. And he's like, "You can't stay out here. You need to come to my house, stay with me." And the guy says, "No, we'll stay out here." And he said, he insisted that you go with me. And so he eventually accepts it, goes in. So he asks the question, "Whither goest thou? And whence comest thou?" Those are two good questions. Here's a sermon that has those two questions of an evaluation. So you can stop at any point in your life and ask those two questions. Where am I coming from? Where am I going? And those are good questions to ask. And we won't go through all of that, but those are 10 different points where we need to be going to and leaving the bad and going to the good. Now, under that, you see that when he says, "I'm going to the house of the Lord," that's also applicable to us. We go to the house of the Lord to worship, we go to the house of the Lord to work, and we go to the house of the Lord to live in heaven. So there's 3 points about going to the house of the Lord.
It's real similar to the Lot story, isn't it?
It is. It's very similar. And so you can put Genesis 19, which is where that's found, in your notes. You also see a pattern here, don't you, of abusive behavior in homosexually dominated cities? It might be something to keep in mind, because you're 1,000 years later. This is not any cultural thing, but you got the same behavior being perpetrated. All right, I'm going to the house of the Lord, verse 15. No man lets me sit with him. And he said, "Yet I've got straw for the horses and pot provender, so I'll just stay out here." And no, this is the old man. Listen, I remember there it is. There's not a lack of anything. So that's the man saying, "I'm okay, I'll just stay out here in the street." And then verse 20, the old man said, "Peace with thee. Howsoever, let all thou wants lie upon me, only lodge not in the streets." Did he know his neighbors? He lived among them. You see, you can't stay out here. You cannot stay in the streets. You better come in my house. So he brought him into his house, took care of his animals and so forth. Now here's a sermon called "Beware of Canaanite Vice in Israelite City." They didn't stay in the Canaanite city. You would expect this behavior in the Canaanite city, but when you get Canaanite behavior in an Israelite city, you got a problem. Now the application of that is when the world, as long as the church is in the world, it's okay. But when the world gets in the church, that's a problem. As long as the ship is in the water, no problem. When the water gets in the ship, you got a problem. So that's what you're dealing with here. But this is a specific application. You can preach that against any worldliness that comes into the church. And there's a lot of it, because the world's always trying to conform us into its image, Romans 12:2. But this is about the sin of homosexuality, because that's the context here. But you could apply it to fornication or immodesty or drinking or drugs or lying, any immorality would fit. All right, beware of Canaanite vice in Israel. City number one, beset. What did these? Okay, let me give you a definition before I do that. You're just homophobic. A better way to look at that is, what does homophobe mean? Fear of the same. Homosexuality is the same sex. So homophobe is fear of the same. Here's another word, learn this word. Theophobe. What is theos? That's God. So I'm not a homophobe. I'm a God-fearer. We ought to be theophobes. And if you're a theophobe, you can't go along with homosexuality because the Bible is very clear about that. God made male and female, two genders, and they belong in marriage together, male and female. God made Adam and Eve. He didn't make two men. He didn't make two women. He didn't make one man with six women or one woman with six men. One man, one woman, one life. That's how God set it up. That's still the right way. And Jesus endorsed that, of course, in the New Testament, Matthew 19. We have time to go over there and see what Jesus endorsed. That's a very good chapter to show that God set it up the way he wanted it. But let's just do this one. So here are good reasons to be homophobic. Are you scared of a snake? Are you snakeophobic?
Not a fan. Don't run.
I'm a snakeophobe. I don't like rattlesnakes. I don't like cottonmouths. Yeah. I can tell you some story about some cottonmouths that I almost stepped on about long. But I'm scared of snakes. Should you be afraid of? Give me something that's scary to you. What are you afraid of?
Heights.
What?
Heights.
Heights. Heights are dangerous. Is there a reason to be afraid of heights?
Yes.
Like if you got bad balance, you don't need to live in high places. You don't need to climb up on your roof if you don't have good balance. Like hire somebody to do that. I preached a gospel meeting at a place years ago with a preacher. He lived next door to the church house. This was in Mississippi. Nice guy. I liked him. Anybody old enough to remember when you get up on the roof and turn the antenna so you could get the reception?
Thank God, no.
All right. Well, he climbed up on his roof to change the antenna, and there was a storm brewing, and the preacher fell off the preacher's house and died. There's a reason to be afraid of heights. Okay, a lot of people die when they fall down the stairs or whatever. So anyway, the point I'm trying to make, I got off trail there, is if there's something that you ought to be afraid of, there's no shame in being afraid of it. It's caution, it's wisdom. So is there any reason to be afraid of homosexuals? I'm not talking about every homosexual, but I'm talking about what we have seen in the culture of homosexuality in the Bible and in modern. Now, this stuff is not reported, right? Like when the homosexuals in San Francisco encircled a church building during services and beat on the doors and walls, threatening the members. Did you hear about that on the national news? Well, that kind of stuff happens, but it doesn't get reported. Now, in the age of AI, you got to make sure that it actually happened.
Right.
That actually happened before AI. That was years ago. All right, anyway, so reasons to be homophobic. They beset the house. They beat at the door. They demanded the master of the house, the old man, to send out his guests so they could kidnap them. So they wanted him to be an accessory to the crime that they could practice homosexual rape. Would you be afraid if you were in that house and those demands were made? Would you be homophobic at that moment? Oh yeah, right. Now, we shouldn't be afraid of a sinner. I mean, we shouldn't avoid teaching those who are guilty of that sin any more than we're afraid to teach someone who is living with his girlfriend. I mean, those are sexual sins, right? One's against nature, one is natural, but both of them are sin. And then you could illustrate it. I will say this before we leave this. One of the accusations that the homosexual community says about religion, not churches of Christ necessarily, but they would group us in that, is that you condemn us for same-sex relationships, and you got people in your pews that are living together that aren't married, and you never even mention that. Or you've got people committing adultery, living in adultery because of divorce, remarriage, divorce, remarriage, divorce, remarriage. And you're solid on that. And you know what? They got a point. They got a point. We cannot pick and choose what scriptures we're going to enforce. It's not that we don't preach against homosexuality, because the Bible tells us to do that. But we must also preach against other moral sins in order to be consistent, in order to be right, in order for God to bless us. Now, sometimes those adultery sermons, you got a rich giver, big giver in the church, says, and the elders already know, they let him know, if our preacher preaches on adultery, I'm out of here. I'm taking my check and going somewhere else. And there have been elders that said to the preacher, don't preach that here. That's beyond the authority of an eldership. Because the commission of God is preach the gospel. That means all of it. Nobody can tie my hands. Now, they could ask me, and I would honor it. Generally, right now is not a good time to preach on that. That's wisdom, right? They may be dealing with a situation behind the scenes that I don't even know about. That if you get up there and preach on that, they're going to think that we told you, and you're going to make this situation a whole lot worse. So please don't preach on that right now. I get that. That's good. Listen to your elder. But you can't not preach gospel at some point. All right, we got to see where we are. Got 9 minutes. So let me point out what this is. These are the Bible descriptions of homosexuality in this one context. You can expand this, but these are sons of Belial. Is that a compliment in the Old Testament? No, it means to be worthless, wicked, so forth. Number 2, we may know him. Well, that's homosexuality right there. How does the Bible describe it? Sons of Belial. Wickedness, verse 23, folly, verse 23, and then when you get to 24, it's not on the screen, vile. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4 descriptions of homosexuality in this context. Are any of them positive? No. Okay. Now, here's where the man and the old man, that he's trying to reason with him. No, I'm not going to send my guest out, but I tell you what, I'll send my daughter out.
That's horrible.
It's horrible. You can do what you want to with her. Gang rape for your own daughter? I can't even imagine. And the man says, well, I'll give you my contract. You're going to send your wife to be gang raped? Concubine's like a secondary wife, right?
My argument would be that they knew, or he knew what they were after. So it kind of mirrors that Lot situation, because Lot was like, oh, take my daughters. But he knew that their passions were not for women.
Yeah.
He knew their passions were for each other.
But many homosexuals are bisexual. And that's what turns out to be the case here, because they abused her all night. And Let's read about that. This is so sad to me. What contributed to this tragedy? Wicked men, those are the ones in the city, a husband, a father, the woman. Now, how could you say the woman contributed to it? Well, she played the harlot. So they would have never been in this city if she hadn't done what? Left her husband and went and played the harlot and ended up in her father's house. They wouldn't have even been on this trip. This is something to tell the youth group when you speak to young people. One reason to keep your virginity as a young woman, also true of a young man, but as a young woman, is if you have sexual relations with a boyfriend, and then later you say, no, I don't want to do that. What's the likelihood that there will be a forcible rape in that situation compared to a date with a virgin? Less or more? Like you already did it before. What is it? Or what about this one? Do girls talk? Okay. Do boys talk? In the locker room? This is reality, right? So this girl goes out on a date and has sexual relations with a boy. They're not boyfriend and girlfriend. They're not together, at least not anymore. In the locker room, well, I'm not going to say it, but he brags about it. Other guys in the room are like, that girl sleeps around. And one of them asks that girl out. She accepts the date. And then somewhere in the date, he wants to have sexual relations with her. She says, no. And he says, well, you had sex with so-and-so. What, is he better than me? You see how a bad reputation opens one up for expectations and even rape. It's not the girl's fault. I'm not saying that. It's never the girl's fault to be forced. But does one open herself up to the likelihood that it may happen? Yes, it can be that. All right, and then Satan, of course, is ultimately behind all of it. Now, that gets us, I'm not going to be able to cover that. Let's go on down then. You might want to take a picture of those notes right there, though. Going to do 28 with you, but if you want to do, anybody want to do those notes down through 27? What happened here, I'll describe it while you're doing that, is they abused her all night. She is almost dead. She's crawling on the ground. How many times was she raped that night? I don't know. A dozen times?
We aren't told.
We're not told. I don't want to get too graphic here, but do you think that they were gentle with her? A gang rape is not a gentle exercise, right? Okay, so this poor woman has been maltreated. And she's crawling back when daylight comes and all the men have left her out there on the street. You see how horrible men can be? She crawls back to the threshold of the door where her husband, he hadn't even checked on her all night. I sort of wonder if he did this because that she cheated on him. I don't know. He shouldn't have done it, but he doesn't seem to have much concern for her. Anyway, he comes out. And she is laying on the doorstep. And he says, come on, let's go. Hard-hearted, cold-blooded. Verse 28. Pitiless. And she didn't answer, verse 28. Is she dead? I don't know. Is she passed out? I don't know. So I don't know if he killed her when he cut her up in pieces, or if she's already dead, or she died before they got home. I like to think that she was at least dead before he cut her up in pieces. This is a horrible chapter even to think about, but it's here. So when he got her home, he took a knife, divided her and her bones, 12 pieces, sent her to all the coast of Israel. So one city received a foot. Can you see a box opening? What they send us? Open it up. There's a hand in this box. There's a hand. There's a torso. There's a finger. I don't know what he did, but divided her body into 12 parts. So they said it's never been done like, we've never seen the like of this before. And I'm glad they hadn't. So I started a sermon here, just got the title so far, Unique Deeds in History. It only happened one time. This only happened one time, as far as I know. So let's get to chapter 20. We'll go ahead and do the keys. We may have to stop there. We got 1 minute. I guess we will stop there. We'll start there after lunch. And we're just about where we wanted to be. I'd like to be maybe through this chapter, but we'll finish that after lunch, and then we'll do Ruth. All right, my Zoom group. Enjoy teaching you. Appreciate you joining us. We'll take our break for lunch. Check back at the hour, and we haven't been able to make it back exactly by that time so far. So it'll probably be 1:15 our time, a quarter after your time. But check back, and we'll jump back in and finish everything this afternoon, Lord willing. So thank you.
Okay, brother. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. Does anybody have
Thank
a?
you.
You're welcome, brother. A
Does
C
anybody
charger.
have what?
A C charger in the room.
I have one in the
Oh,
car.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have one, but I'm not close by.
Is it? Yeah, see them up there. That's what I did. Can I borrow that during lunch? On charge it during lunch. Thank you. You're off the hook there, Ernest.
I've got one in the car.
That's okay. We got it. We got it covered right here. Thank you.
Your lunch, guys.
All right. Y'all not going with us today? You're doing your own?